Welcome to Focus on Wellness in 2021. I'm Brianna, and I have a guest with me today here, Anna-Pate. So we're going to navigate a really beautiful organic conversation on flowing from adversity and trauma into wellness. We've got a little PowerPoint. I'm sure we'll learn so much more about the great work that Anna-Pate is also doing. We encourage you to tune in and plug in the chat box, and our warm line is here, so feel free to reach out there if you need any support. But yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce Anna-Pate. Welcome.
Wow, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be asked to come on here and share a little bit of my story and what I'm doing with the organization I'm currently working for, which is Green Tree Support Center here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which is where I'm located. I'm doing art classes over there right now, and we are working on a whole bunch of new awesome things that are coming up, that are in the works, that are hopefully going to be getting ready to get a move on here soon. So I'll talk about that in a little bit, or now, Bree, whatever you need from me.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited to hear more about what Green Tree is doing out there in Forsyth County, so that our viewers also, because we have people right with the internet tuning in from all over. So with our powers combined, it's really cool to see other people speaking from their lived experiences that are turning their pain and struggles into inspiration for themselves and others. So yeah, I'm super excited. If you'd like, you can share. So you said you're doing art classes over there, and
yeah, absolutely. So I actually got involved with Green Tree by chance. I was opening events for them on the weekends to raise money for the center, and I ran into the director, and we got to talking about our shared lived experiences, and I got to know a little bit more about the organization and about the peer model and this recovery movement that is just, I had never really had any experience with anything like this before. And as soon as I heard about what Green Tree was doing, I just said, all right, I'm on board, let's go. So I started teaching some art classes. I do that on Thursdays at the center, and we kind of orchestrate the art classes in a very free flow manner as far as, trying out new mediums and seeing how we can express ourselves in a unified manner that can lead us closer to, a sense of freedom through expression and freedom through, unleashing this creativity that maybe we didn't even know we had together. So that's been wonderful. As for me personally, I went through some ECPR training in January, and I was fortunate and blessed in the sense that I was able to do some peer support training in March. So I am sort of getting the ball rolling on that, going to be a little more involved in Green Tree on that front, and I am absolutely ecstatic to see where that goes. So Green Tree is in the process of opening, and we're in the beginning stages of running I don't think we've quite hit the nail on the head as far as the name of our center goes, but we're opening a center that is for post-hospitalization, de-escalation, and community center, essentially. So it's a wonderful place that is peer run, where individuals who feel that they may need some extra support, extra resources, a place where they can go and experience a sense of safety and maybe just be in a position where they can dive into developing this recovery network of people who understand and are there to just be relentlessly supportive. And it's been wonderful to be a part of, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. So
yes, I'm so excited to hear about that. It sounds, so you're doing like a respite center as well. I know, that Promise Resource Network, we've got a lot of beautiful things in the work with that as well. So it's just so inspirational to hear more and more parts of our communities around, North Carolina and all over, growing these spaces so that there is a container for safety and connecting and exploring our lived experiences in a way that isn't, in the context of, the clinical models.
Absolutely.
So I can only imagine, how long have you personally been like getting involved with the recovery movement? You said you sort of came about it happenstance a little bit with Green Tree Peer Center in Winston-Salem. So yeah, where were you at in your journey? What kind of led you here? What's been coming of it? We had the pleasure of meeting each other, like you said, in that ECPR training for Green Tree, which is phenomenal, and I'm sure we'll speak to that. But yeah, I'd love to hear more and share with everyone, that process of recovery.
Absolutely. It's interesting because when this sort of happenstance adventure occurred, when I met the director of Green Tree, I was in a position at the time where I really felt like I was at this place with my own recovery journey where I had hit this kind of peak, and I was like, the world is open, and it was just, it was amazing and wonderful. And it just, everything kind of clicked the way and the time at which it kind of felt like it was supposed to, which, I've noticed throughout my life that I feel like doors open when I'm kind of ready for them. And I'm super grateful for that. And that's not always the case, but in this one it was. But as far as my own recovery journey and my own recovery process, there's a whole lot there, but I can try and condense it just a little bit. Let's see.
Yeah,
What?
Yeah, I was saying that we honor, whatever you feel in sharing your heart and your wisdom.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's see. So I have been personally, I just want to preface this by saying that anything that I say about my recovery journey is absolutely my own experience, strength, and hope. And I would never want that to be projected onto anyone else. So I try and say that often when I'm talking about my recovery journey, because I would never want to come across as, pushing anything that may have helped or not helped me onto anybody else. So, but that being said, I've been dealing with and living with and surviving and thriving with, mental health issues since I was about 4 years old. And I was kind of thrown into the clinical model at a very young age, like in just a world of hospitals and doctors and, always feeling like, I had parents that wanted to help, but really didn't know how. They really didn't understand where I was or who I was. And, this led to a lot of labels for me, a lot of feeling as though, I was just an individual who had mental health issues, who, was the problem child, who, couldn't act or react or respond like other people. I felt very isolated for a very long time. And, those struggles started to increase pretty drastically around 14. I started dealing with some psychosis. And, I think that for me, throughout my life, dealing with mental health adversities kind of led me towards being in a position where the adversities of my life were amplified a lot. And, I think I oftentimes felt as though I couldn't handle things like other people, and there was something wrong with me. And, why can't I just get it together? Why can't I just figure out the magic solution to, this question mark of what it is that's wrong with me? And, it's interesting because until I got into the world of recovery as an adult, I really and genuinely felt as though I was the only person who felt that way. And it wasn't until I got into the world of recovery that I felt this sense of ease and comfort, because it was the first time in my life, it was around 20 years old, that I realized I am not alone. I'm not the only person who lives like this and lives with this and, walks through this and, walking into this world where I realized that I could walk hand in hand with other people who maybe had been where I was and were a little farther in their journey, who could sort of hold my hand and walk with me through this kind of stuff. It was eye-opening, to say the least. Yeah, I actually started trying to get sober when I was 19, and that was a journey in and of itself that took about 5 years, but I actually have a year and 3 months sober and clean. So thank you. It has been a journey, but that's just kind of life, and I think that the more that I was able to connect and, network with and meet and understand the people in my life who had been where I was, which was this place of what felt like total isolation, I started to kind of come into my own. And the more I came into my own, the more I realized that the things that I had dealt with, that I had lived through, that I had walked through, weren't these things that made me different and not as good as other people, or, not as capable as other people. It was something that I could take, with me and carry everywhere I go and use to not only connect with other people, but to help other people as well. Because while there were people when I was, 19, 20 years old who said, "Hey, I've been where you are, grab my hand. I know how to get out of this because I've been here before." At almost 26, now I have the gift of being able to do the exact same thing for other people. And getting involved in this network with the organization that I'm currently working with, Green Tree, has just been a snowball effect of meeting so many amazing people who have been in all sorts of different places on that, spectrum, if you will, as far as where they are in their journey and the things that they have lived through and what it's taken to get them exactly to where they are and exactly to where they're okay with being. And just the acceptance that I have started to really realize and hone in on, as far as the fact that those labels and that narrative and that identity that I thought I carried for so long as a child, as an adolescent, as far as I'm so different and I can't do this and why am I like this? And instead being able to say, "Oh my God, I am so resilient. And the people around me are so resilient. This is amazing." And, what strength, like what strength, and seeing that in other people and having those supporters in my life look back at me and say, "You're doing the same thing," has just been life changing. So.
Absolutely. I loved so much. Thank you for sharing and being vulnerable with your story and kind of, speaking to like the childhood adversity part of it and carrying that part of it through so many years. And what I hear though, and what I love, and why I also love that you also are an artist, is speaking to the transformations and that resiliency piece of all of our lives have been impacted by trauma in some form or another. The more that I've also, what resonated is this recovery network. The more that you are connected in these safe spaces where everyone is encouraged to just, share where they come from, to, honor where they're at in their journey, and everyone lending that helping hand and being like, like you're not alone in this, is so important. We wouldn't be here today without it, right?
Exactly.
Which is phenomenal. And it looks different at different points in our journey in life, and there are always things that might potentially happen, but having this strength of human beings that are rocking it with you is just like a wonderful anchor. And it just makes my heart so happy. And I know I feel that same gratitude with being newly involved here with the Promise Resource Network and all that we offer, and not feeling like, that shame or that guilt or that burden again, or feeling that isolated piece of I'm the only one, because so often in the journey, it's like, I've had many compassionate people, but not a lot of people who really understood what it's like to live through. So that compassion was really important and helped me thrive and survive too. But like you said, there is a big shift when you're like, oh, like, my story isn't like unique, not in like a bad way or anything. Oh, yeah. It's just like, there's like, yeah, wow, like how did you, wow, like you're just amazing, like, and holy crap, that's really painful and hard, and like lending this space of openness around that so that we can make meaning and realize that we are deserving and capable of living and thriving, in the kinds of lives that we want for ourselves, despite having been through trauma and adversity and hardships of all kinds. So, yeah.
And just having that hope inspired, I believe, that for me, with the topic of conversation as far as supporters and this recovery network that is, built around us, I think that when I was able to see someone or people who had been through something similar to something that I had been through that had caused this feeling of isolation, this feeling of, in some cases, worthlessness and all types of negative emotions and this negative self-image. And to see people who, like I said, could say, I've been there and it's okay. And you will walk through this and you don't have to do it alone. And to have that hope inspired was one of the biggest pieces of my recovery. Once I had that to hold on to, all of a sudden the I can't became maybe I can.
Oh, yes. I love it. Love it. I remember when I was in kindergarten, my teacher, I also went through a lot of childhood adversity. But holding on to those beautiful moments that still happened gave me strength. And I had this teacher who had this little stuffed dragon. And anytime we said, I can't, she would make us write down what we can't and feed it to the dragon so that it would basically alchemize is what she was doing. But she's like, you feed it to the I can't monster because you can. And I love that because it's like, yes, being able to change the relationship to the words, which is also so important in understanding our journey of healing and trauma, the way that we've been stigmatized and the language, it sometimes, deepened that wound of how we saw ourselves and related to ourselves. So being able to flip that and transform it is like one of my favorite things, and I love that. That's what came up when you said that, switching that model or that framework of yes. So I love it. Well, also, since we're on this, I put together a little slide so we can kind of touch on that and spin it back around to also like where, the 8 dimensions of wellness, how you kind of your relationship with that, and I'll share too. So bear with me. Hopefully, no technical difficulties happen here where the screen suddenly closes out. All right.
Perfect.
Lovely. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. All right. So understanding trauma. Just put there are many different definitions of it. As we know, there's not a human being living that hasn't been impacted by trauma in some way. This is the definition that SAMHSA provides. Trauma is a widespread, harmful, and costly public health problem. It occurs as a result of violence, abuse, neglect, loss, disaster, war, and any other emotionally harmful experiences. So anytime we might not have, got that emotional support that we needed. Trauma has no boundaries in regards to age, gender, socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, geography, or sexual orientation. It is an almost universal experience of people with mental and substance use disorders. And I'll lend space as I kind of go through it, Anna-Pate, if you want to, if there's anything, and it's okay if there's not, that resonates or that stands out, or just.
There's plenty. I promise that I always have, I can always figure out something to say. So that's not an issue. But I think that is a very interesting, definition, and it hits the nail on the head as far as my experience is concerned. It is so widespread. And I think that for me, throughout my life, I had a very narrow perspective on what I thought trauma was or what trauma looked like. And, as someone who has been through a lot of different types of trauma for pretty much my entire life, I think that there were also a lot of things that I wasn't necessarily able or comfortable with defining as what it truly was, which was trauma, until later in my recovery journey, because, there were some things that were genuinely too difficult to define as trauma. And it was much easier to say, oh, this is just, something that happened, or something that happens to people, or everybody goes through this. And I think that it is empowering, at least for me in my experience, to identify an event or an experience or an adversity that I have gone through as traumatic. That has definitely given me comfort in a way to say, no, this did happen. And this does have validity to it as far as the impact that it has had on me or on a family member or on a friend, and I think that it's fascinating and scary to realize how widespread that is. But again, I think that moving forward in the conversation, being able to touch on, not necessarily what we can do, but how we can continue to live our lives in a way that is meaningful and powerful and, creative and wonderful in the face of or in spite of events that we may have gone through or adversities we may have lived through.
Anna-Pate, speaking to my heart here. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That understanding that lens, and like you said, and acknowledging when we're ready for that door to open, but understanding that lens is a game changer. It really does shift so much in the narrative of, how we identify with ourselves and the world around us. And also seeing how vastly so many are impacted by this.
Right.
It's definitely a game changer for sure. Which lends into the next part. And like you said, we all kind of, how do we get through that? We have a class called, we have so many classes that are just wonderful. And I encourage anyone who's watching or tuning in to please check them out. We have one called Just for Today, and it's like, sometimes we get so far ahead and like, how am I going to, get to where I want to be on this journey? But bringing it back to like, what can I do right now in this moment, just for today? So here we have the post-traumatic growth. And I put a definition by a trauma-informed therapist, yoga teacher, writer, healer that I really love, Dr. Ariel Schwartz. And she's got this really cool book called the Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook as well. So she says, exposure to disturbing or traumatic life events is inevitable. Following these events, most people experience uncomfortable emotions and sensations such as grief, fear, anxiety, panic, anger, or depression. Initially, it's common to brace against these disorienting emotions. And this is normal. And with sufficient support, it is possible to successfully navigate through these vulnerable emotions. In time, hopefully, we can reframe our relationship to pain and discomfort as an invitation to enter into a transformational journey, awakening post-traumatic growth. And then there's a quote. She says, transformation involves the ability to feel and be changed by difficult life experiences. This process affirms our capacity to heal and connects us to the universal cycles of life, death, and rebirth.
Mm. What a beautiful quote. That is phenomenal. I'm going to absolutely have to check out that book, that workbook. Is it a workbook?
Yeah, it's sort of like, she talks through stuff, and then there's each chapter, you sort of have like an area to write in, or I use my own personal journal, but there are prompts and as you're going through this process. But yeah, I can share it in a link too for anybody else who might be interested.
I am highly interested in that. That is absolutely beautiful. I love the end part of the quote talking about the capacity to heal, connecting to the the universal cycle of life, death, and rebirth, because that is that cycle of rebirth has been one that I have held dearly to, and the idea that not only is that something that is possible for what I have often felt, for someone like me who has been through adversity, who lives with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, is that it is, an innate part of life. Mm-hmm. So not only is it possible for me, but this rebirth is a process that can happen, sometimes in spite of me. And looking at the things that I can do to participate in that process for myself, for my recovery, for my journey of rebirth through the face of trauma in my history, in my past, in my life, and how it affects me today is absolutely amazing. I love that. That gave me chills.
Yes, I love it too, because like you said, as someone who's also had lived experience with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and early childhood adversity, and been, touched by all types of, abuses and things of that nature. These perspectives are what gives me life. To know like those cycles, right? We can see these parallels in nature and the universe all around us, where with the seasons, here we are coming out of winter when things sort of, fade away and get more cold, and, it's more gray and less lush, but there's still so much life teeming underneath all of that. And it's not always easy, but then we're in this another rebirth of another season where things are coming back, even when they looked like they might have been dead, barely hanging on. They're blooming again and thriving. And maybe there's some new flowers or a new species of plant or something that's, caught up in that beautiful eco cycle, and I think it's really important that we kind of see ourselves in that context, because it's so easy, again, to feel so isolated as we're going through hardships and toxic stress and trauma and struggles, but to know that there's this greater support around us, and to know that there is always this chance. We are resilient. We are a phenomenally resilient species that can come, through some of the most harrowing, experiences in life. And I had a beautiful chance to participate in a virtual art gallery with a friend, and their piece was also talking about the expansion of the universe, and also, science and human, like nature, like emotions being like this beautiful thing that's constantly evolving. For so long, we put it just in this logical place, but they were talking about empathy even being like an evolution. And that just like made me light up so much, to think how all these things are just transforming and have these chances to grow into something we don't yet know. And the unknown doesn't always have to be bad. You know, we can brace through it and navigate through it. And we do that in ways of like this, you know, connecting in relationship with other people who can say, you know, I get it, and to share our journeys of how does that sort of stuff resonate, you know? So,
No,
or were you going to say something?
Oh, I've just been thinking. I mean, I love this conversation, and it's something that I think is just so powerful. And for me, so often, and I can still do this all the time. I mean, I'll get in this spot where I'm so overwhelmed, and I don't even know what of. I'll just be like, I'm overwhelmed by life. You know, there's just so much, and not necessarily acknowledging, you know, the history that we've talked about. And I think that taking a look at, like we were talking about, this cycle of rebirth and the ebb and flow of my humanity and my experience of being a human being, and, you know, coming to this acceptance that I am okay. I am fundamentally okay, and I am fundamentally okay in this moment, has just been a huge game changer for me. And it's not something I can always hold on to, but it's something that I really try to keep in the back of my head, because that acceptance that life is going to change, and that, you know, that fear of the unknown is so innate, but also, like you said, doesn't really have to be scary. You know, it can be exciting. So many things that I am afraid of, I think I have the power to redefine that for myself. And that is a pretty cool way to reshape my perspective on life in the day-to-day.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I'm sure it's inspiring me, and that it's going to inspire anyone else who sees this and anyone else that you come into contact with. Because like you said, you know, and it's okay to not be okay. You know, we know there are going to be some things that might test and challenge us, but as we strengthen and grow the tools that we have for wellness, and that connection to our humanity, I have more than I had when I was at my lowest point, you know, and continuing to lean into those resources and these networks is everything. So here I put a beautiful symbolic, we all know the the caterpillar to the hi Roberta, I'm sorry you're frustrated. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that, yeah, a job, she says I need a job. Absolutely. That part of our wellness is, you know, so important too, you know, how we meet our financial needs. And we're in such a difficult time with the pandemic and stuff. So if you haven't, yeah, yeah, the waiting is the hardest part. I think there, I always think about that Tom Petty song, and I'm like, yeah, sometimes it is very frustrating. And yeah, so acknowledging again that it's okay to not be okay, and you're so welcome. Thank you for sharing. And I hope that you lean into all the resources that Promise Resource Network has. And feel free to call our warm line if you want to talk to someone and process and see if there are any other resources. Because the biggest thing is knowing that we're not alone in this journey. It can be hard when we're very, you know, when we're feeling really beat down. That one little thing, just getting up to take a shower, is hard enough, let alone thinking about, you know, how am I going to pay my bills, and, you know, all of these different things. And like, you know, yeah, we live in a capitalist society, and, you know, we need yeah, it's so complicated. So I'm proud of you for being here and for naming that. And yeah, and Anna-Pate is at Green Tree Peer Services in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. So if there are any people out there, rad, Roberta, yes, I hope so, please. She said PRN might have a virtual job for me. So yeah. So as we're kind of talking about these transformations, again, we see this the caterpillar to the butterfly, and remembering, when it's first starting out, look at all this. It actually goes into just making that cocoon, the transformation that happens inside of that, and then coming out of it as this, beautiful winged insect that is now like a completely different, it's the same but completely different, right? That metamorphosis. So creative flow is generated when we are willing to release our painful feelings. There's often an electric feeling of both trepidation and excitement during the transformational work of healing trauma. This is often reflected in our dreams, images, metaphors, and narratives, like a threatening snake transformed into a powerful staff, becoming a source of creativity. So, yeah, that's a big one. And yeah, I hear you, Roberta, on the car payments and stuff too. I've been there. You're doing a great job. The fact that you keep, putting yourself out there, I just want to say I'm so proud of you for that. So, yeah, so maybe what comes up around this sort of transformational process, the caterpillar, the larvae into the beautiful butterfly, and when we're in these sort of hardships and not being able to see that just yet, but knowing that it can be transformed and using different symbolisms and stuff in the creative part of the work.
Absolutely. And I think that looking at that image, it's easier for me to work backwards, looking at the butterfly and going back to the caterpillar as far as looking at my own journey. I had an experience, it was either last week or the week before. I was talking to someone who I'm just now getting to know, who's a friend of a friend. And we were sort of touching on a little bit of experience, strength, and hope, talking about the people we used to be, in a sense, and kind of what that means. And I was describing, some ways, shapes, and forms of, the person I was before this recovery journey. And she didn't believe me. We kind of joked around, and she said, "There's no way. There's absolutely no way." And I was taken aback for a moment, because that's still how I see myself a lot of the time, is, this little girl who's just frightened and scared and self-destructive and angry and, torn between isolation and longing, for friendship, for understanding, for that connection, and simultaneously this driving fear of getting close to people and just being so driven by 100 forms of fear. And the person who I was talking to just looked at me and said, "There's no way." And I absolutely couldn't believe it. And it sort of shocked me into this sort of light bulb moment of realizing that there are pieces of me that I never in a million years would have thought could have even begun to heal or to transform, that are beginning to change. Even though there are still a plethora of areas of my life and areas of, my psyche and my heart that have, my whole life to have the opportunity to continue to heal and to grow. The fact that I was able to get this sort of little bit of, validation in this light bulb moment, like I said, that there are parts of me that have begun to heal was astounding. I think that oftentimes we are the last people that see our own growth. At least that's been the case for me. And, there are so many things over the years, so many resources I've utilized, so many parts of myself that I've had to face in order for that to happen. And it hasn't been easy. It's not always easy. For me, I use art. I'm a visual artist. And I think that that has been probably the number one tool I've used, like it said in this PowerPoint, as far as releasing these painful feelings and working on the healing of trauma and how it can be reflected. And for me, a lot of times it's reflected in my art. And when I don't have the words, and there are many times when I don't have the words, I am able to utilize different forms of, medium to create. And there's so many different forms of creation as well that I think we all have access to in one way or another. So.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you again for sharing all of that. And thinking back about, the depth of those wounds, and, the fact that I often think if, 27 years of my life, give or take, especially the first 22 were like this, and I'm 33 now. It only makes sense that I'm still going to be healing. Like, right. I'm still in the, right? Like, just the equation. I'm so happy, Roberta, that you are here. And I'm sorry that it's been rough, but I am just so grateful. She said we've made her feel better. And
I'm so glad. If there's anything that I could have said to make you feel better, I'm glad. I can see a few of the comments. And one thing that I saw, Roberta, was that you said, isn't it funny that we love to help, but asking for help is rough? And that's been very true for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, because sometimes I feel like, I don't know about with you, but I kind of like, because I was surviving, and that part of my resiliency then was like, I got this even when I didn't have it. Mm-hmm. And then also the shame and stuff that's attached to like needing support and being in that vulnerable place, to accept it is like, it is difficult, but it, again, game changer, like, because, there's no shame in asking for support. And in fact, we need it intrinsically as human beings. We can't survive without that support system. And that's why it's so important as we're healing and in our recovery, to grow that and to lean into our own personal practices. Like you were reflecting on how for you, when things are really difficult and ineffable, you can't put them into words or exactly feel it in those sort of ways. You transform it into that practice for you. Right. And that is powerful, and somebody else, that could be going to run a marathon, or it could just be going to drive to their favorite store, anything that, whatever that is. And it's just, it's so important. And I had a thought that was following that, but then I got too far ahead of myself, so I lost it. But yes, it's Oh, I was thinking about a quote that I keep coming back to, and I reflected it in a class yesterday that I heard of. It's one of those things with healing. No one can do it for us. Like, we have to go through those dark things, but we can't do it alone at the same time. Right. So finding that balance of, empowering ourselves and rebuilding, reclaiming our relationship to our voice, to our experiences, but also, again, leaning into that support network that we have to have to thrive and survive, especially depending on where we're at in the journey. If I'm, when I think about times where I was homeless, I didn't have a car, I didn't have a job, all these different things I'm thinking about, I need to go get, food stamps again, but like then just even that whole process, like how am I going to eat? Like how am I going to do this? Oh, if I get a job, it has to be in this certain radius because, you know, the bus systems and I got to walk there. Like, you know, like that back then, you know, was tremendously harder. Like, you know, but again, like I couldn't have done it alone. And I think that's why it's so important that we're echoing all of this, and the need to cry is important. You know, that's a release of our, you know, what we're feeling and our emotions. A lot of times when we've been through hard stuff, sometimes it can feel so overpowering that it's difficult to go there because we haven't had safe containers or the understanding of, you know, how we can do that in a healthy way to process. But it's, you know, that processing is important and it deserves to be cared for and supported. So we're here with you, Roberta.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm trying to get, so yeah, I know we're kind of at the 45-minute mark, so we got about 15 minutes left in the class, and just kind of thinking through. This is the wellness model that, you know, SAMHSA bases around, that we've touched on in these classes before. You know, our emotional wellness, being able to cope effectively with life and creating satisfying relationships, our financial satisfaction with our current and future financial situations, the social aspect, how we develop a sense of connection and belonging in the world, and our support systems. The spiritual foundation being how we expand our sense of purpose and meaning in life, something that's greater than us, what drives us. Occupational, you know, feeling satisfied and enriched from the type of work that we're doing. Physical, how we care for our physical body, you know, how we move it, how we feed it, you know, all of those different things. So yeah, the activity, how we sleep, intellectual, you know, how we recognize our creative abilities to find ways to expand our knowledge and skills. And then our environmental, you know, says good health by occupying pleasant, stimulating environments that support our well-being. And I'm sure that, yeah, so much of, again, wherever we're at on the spectrum, how can we just for today, you know, find some sort of balance? We can't go at it all the way if we're here, you know, it's those baby steps. So yeah, and then I put that quote, trauma survivors have powerfully and systematically documented their paths to recovery. We are, you know, the embodiment of, it's hard freaking work, but we can do this, you know, and we do it together.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I was looking at these 8 spheres, you know, the 8 circles of wellness and how they all connect when you were talking, Bree. And I just had this moment, this little flash of a time in my life, years and years of my life, where there was no balance in any of these spheres. None whatsoever. And I had this little image. I'm very visual, and I was looking, and I was thinking to myself what it would have looked like during those time periods in my life. And I was like, teeny tiny little jagged circles that are just like all over the screen, no cohesion whatsoever. Some of them probably non-existent, and just like if you took a paintbrush and like splattered it on a sheet of paper, that's what that would look like for me for years of my life. And I love the quote as well. I think it's very powerful. And for me, there's about 10 years of my life I have very little memory of.
Yes.
I have very little memory of. And it's interesting because I will talk to people. I've been asked to share my story quite a lot recently. And it's interesting because when I what it was like before I began my recovery journey, and even during most of it, which of course I'm still on it, I always will be. But I don't even know what to say sometimes, because I'm like, I don't know, it was messy, it was bad,
Right.
Yeah. It was super hard and weird, and I don't remember like 95% of the last 10 years of my life, which is, it's so interesting, because when you talk to some people, they have no clue what you're talking about. It's like, no, I was there. It was all over the place. And it was a paint splatter. Um, and it's and memories do come back sporadically, and it's that lack of cohesion that I think is so detrimental, and it feels like it takes, for me, it really did feel like it took my power away, when I was dealing with this utter and total lack of cohesion and total lack of balance in my life. Because it's like you said, Brie, I think when I was in that position where I'm looking at these different areas of my life and they're all over the place, my first thought is the thought that I need to feed to that dragon you were talking about earlier, which is, I can't do this. There's no way I can do this. I was dealing with severe untreated fibromyalgia for years that was undiagnosed. My mental health was not treated in the way that I, ultimately needed it to be in order for me to live a functional life, relatively so. I was in a very unsafe environment for the majority of my life. I had isolated myself to the point where I pushed away anyone who may have tried to be there to support me for a long time. It's every aspect of this. I was just in this position where I felt so lost. And, it's kind of like that class you were talking about as well. And, with the just for today, and what is that one thing I can do? And it might not be within the hour, it might not be within today, it might be within the week. What is one thing I can do to take that next baby step that is going to lead me to the next baby step? Because when it is that sporadic and feels like everything is just like a raw electric wire, just like, all the time. I'm like, I'm going to short circuit. It's like, oh gosh, then I won't be able to do anything. But yeah, just slowing down and saying, like you said, it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay if it's not one thing an hour. It's okay if it's one thing a week. There were years of my life where all I could do was one thing a week, whatever that thing may be, that whatever checkbox I was checking off, or, that chore that I knew doing it would make me feel better and feel like I was accomplishing things, and empowering me, and validating myself, and slowly but surely over years, those baby steps become maybe a little bit bigger steps. And then maybe I'm striding for a little while, and maybe I fall and I got to get back up, because that happens all the time. But
Yes. Yes, I love all of those reflections that you were sharing. And I was thinking back to, that reflection when you were talking about sometimes the most difficult thing is to be able to see the transformation happening within yourself as it's happening. So it might feel like, what's the point of doing? I'm having to take so many baby steps and to get so defeated. But by continuously showing up and just embracing where you're at, and acknowledging where you're not at right now, and not trying to overdo it. Because I think sometimes, that's what happens. And especially when we've been through, trauma, and our support systems have been bad, and we have no capacity or understanding of really, where do I freaking begin? Right? It's like, gosh, like it's difficult. And that's why I also loved having your reflection too of that's a new one. And of when you saw this wellness wheel and reflecting on your journey, and when, the harder times were there, how it looked like all these jagged different sizes and nothing was cohesive, but little by little, you're painting that palette, you're bringing it together in a different way. And it may not look like this exactly, right, but you're defining it in ways that are more healthy and that are helping you to sustain and go forward. And I've had to do that so much. I've either underdone it or overdone it for so long in my life. And I had to learn that. That's why I say balance so much. I know it's one of those words, but it's beautiful because, sometimes you are balancing and you fall down, but through the balance of just understanding, where am I at right now? That simple acknowledgement. I might today, for my physical wellness, make sure that I had a glass of water. I know I need 8, but at least I got a glass in, and I think I had 1 vegetable, or,
Right.
I'm going to try to sleep 6 hours instead of 3 hours. And it just, little by little grows. Like now, I'm constantly putting into reflection of like, where are these things going? And I'm, in terms of like that occupational wellness, like I know you can relate to this, and I know we're reaching the end, but like being able to be involved in a peer-led recovery organization, mm-hmm, and being able to have the chance to have that satisfaction and enrichment in a place where it's like deeply rewarding, on like just this out of this world perspective.
Absolutely. And one thing I was going to say to bounce off of what you were talking about really quickly is that, so when I was first trying to get sober and stay sober, I remember thinking to myself, how in the world is this ever going to feel like something that isn't a every second of the day energy exerting chore? And right, just feeling like, like looking at that whole scope, because it had to change. And someone told me, one day it's just going to start to flow. And it's going to take work between now and then. And it's going to be one little thing here and one little thing there. And it's not going to be everything at once that just, oh, look, I'm this wheel that's balanced and is working, I wish I could snap my fingers and make that work, but that would kind of take a little bit of the fun out of it. But and looking back today, as far as that area of my life goes, it's something that I just live now, and I don't have to sit back and go, where do I start? What do I do? How do I live? And it's just amazing to know that I am allowed to give myself the opportunity to begin that process, and giving myself permission to say, I am so worth this journey. Even if I don't always believe that, or if I don't always feel that, that permission is mine to give to myself.
Speaking to my heart again. Absolutely. Yes. You are deserving of that. I am deserving of that, Roberta. You are, and every single person that's out there and in this world with us. And yeah, again, I just think about the reclamation process of, reclaiming and reshaping our identities and empowering ourselves. Yeah, it's so important. And I appreciate all of your reflections. They've been deeply enriching for me, and I'm sure, and Roberta's reflected that, it resonated, and anybody else that might see this, just thank you so much. And the quote that, I'm ending it with is a quote from Viktor Frankl, and he wrote a book called Man Searches for Meaning. And says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth. And in that, our freedom. You know, and it sort of, I think, beautifully summarizes again, you know, there's always going to be things that are there to, you know, stressors, stimulus, stuff that's coming at us. And we're going to, you know, there's a response action, but in that space, there's a space of pause. And the more that we get connected in these ways of reclaiming our identity, empowering ourselves, you know, we are able to have that deeper reflection. And in that space, you know, of making that choice, as we continue to show up that way, our growth continues to expand. And as we continue to, again, reclaim that, that's where our true sense of freedom comes from, being liberated to be exactly wholly you, with everything you've been through, all that you know you've got that lies ahead that you're dreaming of, all of those aspirations, every single bit of the messy experience of life. Just having that compassion and gratitude for yourself for showing up today. It's amazing. So
my heart now.
Yeah, it's been a very powerful class today. I thank you, Roberta, for joining in, and all those who tuned in earlier. And we encourage you to share these classes, check out our calendar, see what else is up there. There's stuff going on every day, all sorts of amazing stuff that taps into all of those dimensions of wellness that are all from a peer-led recovery perspective. The same as with Anna-Pate sharing from Green Tree Peer Services in Winston. They've got some great classes. She leads some virtual classes as well. Please check out their calendar to also, again, expand all of these resources that we have, because that's what keeps us going. And the warm line number, call us for any emotional support you need. And in the meantime, stay tuned for the next Focus on Wellness in 2021 class at 1 p.m. next Wednesday. Anna-Pate, any final words from you, my love?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. This has been absolutely wonderful. It was, I just feel honored to be given exactly what I needed to get through the rest of today. And, you know, for anyone who is watching or, you know, has been listening or tuning in, if you haven't heard it today, and if it means anything to hear it from me, you are so beyond worth it. And you are so beyond loved, and you are not alone. So that's all I've got.
Thank you. What a beautiful note to end on. Goodbye, everybody.